Hello and welcome to Who Dares Rolls. I am your host Mike B, and here we are. This time we're here for a review no less. Good gracious me, whatever next. So I'm going to be reviewing Vienna Connection from Portal Games. It is a follow-up, kind of a sequel to the original detective game, came out a few years ago, although it's a standalone game set in its own little bit. Just quickly bring you catch up. So Detective, which came out, I'm gonna say a couple of years ago now. I was lucky and fortunate enough to play this before it released with a bunch of reviewers, and Ignacy oversaw us, and it was an astounding experience. I was just brilliant, just fantastic, really thematic. It just did everything that I wanted a detective game to do. There was problems with this. The biggest issue was the writing, I think, in the original Detective, which was kind of been subsequently bettered in like the little expansions and stuff they've done. But yeah, initially it was very like a bit like an airport novel. A bit, I'm not going to say John Grisham because I think he's actually a little bit talented, but you know, that sort of Dan Brown, I'm kind of thinking that sort of trashy airporty novel sort of thing, and overly obsession over people's lunches breaks and stuff. Very weird, but the germ of the idea, the meat of it, fantastic. So that brings us to Vienna Connection, not the Viennetta Connection, which is an entirely different thing. Vienna Connection. Now this is really this is my good shit. This is tickling all the my tickly good stuff. It's set in the 1970s. It's set during the height of the Cold War, really, in Eastern Europe, all around Hungary, Budapest, all of those areas, and Russia and Chypre, everywhere. Sort of all that sort of very much a fertile ground for all sorts of shenanigans. At that point in the 70s, it's a grim and gritty time. This isn't James Bond, okay? This isn't the James Bond spy thing. This is a Cold War spy thriller. Think of stuff like, Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy comes to mind. It's definitely the aesthetic you should be thinking at, that grubby kitchen sink drama almost level of spy thing. These aren't, as I say, muscle-bound James Bond characters. These are grubby men and women in grubby apartments in grubby areas, smoking cigarettes repeatedly and kind of every cold and wet and that gaudy 1970s period at a time in history where there was so much turmoil, and it kind of touches upon this. It's a great thing that it's a fictional tale, but it is kind of enmeshed amongst what was going on at that period of time, and it just gives you brings in little bits of flavour. And again, like Detective, that you can go and you can research a bit more. It gives you links to the websites when there's stuff if it thinks it might be more story, more interesting to you. So let's get down to the gist of how it kind of works, and then I'll go into the full review and bits. So playing it, very straightforward. It's similar to Detective, the original game. It is mostly involved with a deck of cards that you're working through. You have 4 missions in this box set, in this campaign, all of them linked into this overarching larger story, and it's much more sort of streamlined into that, rather than maybe its predecessor was kind of a little bit over the place in some places. But this is very much this slowly evolving larger story played out of this larger canvas across, Eastern Europe. And each of the 4 missions come with their own dossier when you start off, so you get a pack of a mission, will give you some stuff to set yourself up, some sheets and stuff. And there's also this big dossier full of files, lots of files and stuff that we kind of can flick through and find and all that, and had a real tactile kind of gritty grum, like pouring over information. You feel like that sort of hard-bitten Harry Palmer type, sort of rummaging through all sorts of reams of paperwork, and you will, as the game progresses, find yourself just covered in shit everywhere, like, dragging bits of file out and studiously going back down it again and making notes. It is that sort of style of game. So playing it, yes, very simple. You have a playmat, which each of the 4 missions has got a sheet that you use as your basic thing, and where you'll be going to investigations. It's very much streamlined down the rules. In Detective, it was a bit gamey. There was a little gamely element to it to balance in the time where you're going, but this is much more streamlined. Every card you pull may potentially have exposure value, which is how many areas of the map that you're going to scratch off. So that happens, and that's pretty much it. You get a small resource of tokens that you can use to spend either on missions that you may have available in that mission, like operations to do certain stuff that may open up leads or give you more options. And that's kind of how that works, really. It is very straightforward. You do get a really cool thing, is like a cipher. In each mission gives you like a cipher decoder card, like a magic decoder ring. And there will be at points during the missions that you're going to get these coded messages that you're going to break down. There is also in the cards even more ciphers and stuff. There's actual number ciphers that you can decode essentially to be able to give you files or cards that you're going to find. They are optional, and there's an option on the interface, the web interface, that you use the Antares, which is a very trimmed down version of it. It hasn't got all the whiz and bang of the Detective Modern Crime had. This is very sort of basic sort of stuff. There is an option to skip them in the game, which if you're not into that number breakdown code thing, then fine, you can skip that and do it. So that's that. So anyway, that's it. Real basic stuff. It's very straightforward. It's very streamlined. Essentially, you select something and it's going to cost you how much of that to do. There is a ticking clock mechanism in that there's only a finite amount of these areas you can visit, and once they're burnt out, you can't go back. And then there's the man in black, which is a bar down the bottom of the thing, that every time you then spend over, if areas are already kind of mined out of what you can do in them, it goes to the man in black thing, and it will tick down until such a point as when that runs out is the end of the mission. And then you get on the database, you get this little small bit of piece, again, like you did with Detective, where you can answer some questions in relation to stuff you've done, or make options, make decisions on the operation and what's going to happen. And there's only 2 of them you may have a selection of stuff. Depending on what you've learnt during your investigations and what you've dug up, you will pick. And there's no right or wrong answers on this. There's definitely, from what I've played of it, is that its narrative it's kind of branching out all over the place. So it's kind of, there's no ultimate win and ultimate lose unless you can nail it all the way down the line and stop the major mission. But there's definitely sort of small victories along the way, and it will again give you different perks as you go, and you'll track them on a campaign journal. What did I think of it, or what was it? And for me, loved it. Really enjoyed it. I played a couple of these solo, and I also involved other peeps in some of the other bits of the playthroughs of it. And it works both ways. For starters, it works as a really enthralling solo experience, and it's great, as you could do with Detective. However, I will say you could play that through solo completely all the way through, and you're going to have I'm sure, a very satisfying experience. And it works well like that. However, these games are a bit like the hidden trader games in those regards. And the more people involved, the greater the sort of thing. There's more groupthink going off. Now, it may send you down rabbit holes that you don't want to go down. That's going to likely happen because people just have an idea. Oh, well, this means this, and you could follow that route, and it goes nowhere. But that's kind of the fun of the game, is this whole sort of everyone having these moments of, I'm done, eureka, I can think it's this, and joining the dots and stuff. So it works well with more people. It doesn't need to have dozens of you, but I think, the more the merrier in regards to this. Definitely if everyone's like involved in channeling what's going on with this. So yeah, it's themes-wise, it's fantastic. I love the 70s theme. I love what it's doing in that it's evoking this grim and gritty sort of that period of time in Eastern Europe. It's not pretty, it's not nice. Everyone's kind of paranoid. There's secret police, there's the options, there's murder, this is adult territory. This is definitely not something you're going to play with family or kids. There is language, definitely, and there's content warning in regards to torture and other unpleasantries in here. It was going on, and the life of a grutty spy wasn't nice, often cheap and short-lived. And so there's a lot of decision processing in here, and this whole sort of evoking this world, and you've got to kind of just absorb that. The more that you absorb and enjoy that genre, that 70s Cold War genre, the more you're going to get out of this, and it's very much enmeshed in it. It can get convoluted. You're dealing with a lot of foreign names. There's a lot of different characters from all over, from Germany, from Hungary, from Czechoslovakia, from Russia. So, especially for me, tracking that is definitely, you're going to want to make notes and tracking what's going on, because as the story evolves and develops, there's callbacks for stuff going on, and you could easily get lost in a nice way. So aesthetically and all that, it's brilliant. I love the files. There's just streams of these files and all different bits of information, and you can pore over them, and as the game comes into it, there's some really interesting puzzles. It kind of felt a little bit like Time Stories, the very first Time Story, in that there was stuff hidden in plain sight sometimes, and you're having to maybe root through stuff and join the dots of images and text and pulling bits of information out. And there's that lovely moments of elation where you get it, you do it. Now the ciphers, the number ciphers, which you can skip, to be honest, I skipped them because actually all they felt was kind of a way of extending the time of the thing, because they're not actually serving any other purpose than unlocking a file for you or something for you. If you want to use them, great, they're just going to be a bit more time to the thing, but they're not actually, they're meshing you more on the theme, but they're not essential, and I skipped them because there's enough else going on in my opinion, and they felt kind of like a gamely time waste is what it felt like. I mean, the same could be said of the ciphers you're using with the code card, but there's a little bit more fun personally for me to be had to that as someone sits there and slowly decodes it down, and then you get that bit of information, and it's that little buzz moment of get something else. You're not doing anything terribly complex or convoluted. Anyone could do it, but it's kind of a nice sort of buzz of you've solved something, you've moved on. And there's some really nice moments in here in regards to that sort of information being in front of you, and you all suddenly go, oh God, it's there, and you find it and you join the dots and it all works out. So that is all fantastic. There's very little to say, isn't? I mean, the components wise, it's brilliant. You've got essentially a deck of cards that you're using them as you're slowly tracking what you're doing, but the files are a nice aesthetic, tactile appeal. All the paperwork is great. Some of it's really well produced and designed. It just looks kind of evokes all that setting and feel, and it's great to kind of go through this official documentation, and you get new files and you're rooting through it, trying to find information, trying to join the dots, and then pulling it back out later on when you're like, oh, hold on a minute, where's that? And that's what this game is about, is that kind of, I suppose, that Sherlock Holmes consulting detective feel, though I never really got behind it. I found it a little bit too dry and a little bit too much wordiness, too much reading. Look, that reading and writing stuff, not good, is it? No, but there was, I don't know, it was a little bit too much like work, whereas this does a nice in-between level of getting that same sort of information pump at you, but doing it in such a way that it's fun, that you're enjoying that journey, even though there's lots of expedition dumps going on all over the place. On the whole, I personally find this is a better game than Detective the Modern Board Game, in regards because I love the theme and I love the streamlining of the play of it, and the addition of all the wonderful components and stuff just it really elevates that to the next level of storytelling and just immersion. And it is great. I mean, Modern Crime immersed you, but this, brilliant. Just you're really deep in it. If you're a couple of you around and really into that theme and what it's doing, you're going to love it. The only thing that fell a bit flat for me is the ending is a little bit, it takes its cues from 70s cinema in regards, because it's very abrupt. You lead up to your final report, you give that, you start getting some information about it, and then it points you in the direction of one or two things, and it does this abrupt sort of, you're like, oh well, that's it. Now that may be related to how well you did and how much you covered. There's definitely was resolution of arcs and stories there, but it did feel kind of abrupt, like, oh, and that's that. And I guess that ambiguity is quite nice in regards to what its theming is. It applies very well to that. But if you're looking for a grandstanding big Hollywood ending to the game, then it's not there, or at least not in the version I come to. And I'm probably a little naive, coming off of the back of finishing the King's Dilemma, which had this kind of very epic end to the campaign and more twists and turns than I thought were coming. I think that's where the 1 week area in this is, that it would have been nice to have one final surprise or one final kind of just something a little bit cool at the end. Don't know how they could have done it, but yeah, I don't know, something else, just one more trick to throw at you. There's some nice stuff in here, don't get me wrong. The journey is fantastic. As I say, if you're a fan of 1970s Cold War conspiracy thrillery type stuff, absolutely going to lap this up. Really great, really good sort of, just a really complex sort of labyrinthine John le Carre sort of thrillery feel. You aren't really feeling like you're just out of your depth the entire time of the thing, and you're scrabbling from one thing to the other, desperately trying to sort of join the dots, and stuff is going on, especially the later missions. They actually manage to apply some real pressure to proceedings, and you get that real sort of like against the odds, God, we've got to move fast, and there's some really cool little, just it brings in some nice little rule mechanisms and stuff that come in throughout the different missions, that just kind of tweak the game in such a way, and without any real major bump over rules. It's cleverly done, and just ramp that pressure up, and it's great. I love those little moments. They're really good. So yeah, for me personally, they've knocked it out of the park in this one. I loved the original one. This is astounding. Really enjoyed it. I think it's get extra points for me just for the theming alone, which I really, really enjoyed. The sky's the limit on this, really. I mean, this is such a cool system that there is so much you could apply to this, as is we're going to be seeing the June House of Secrets is coming later in the year. I think Essen is due to launch, which again takes the core idea of the detective thing and again sort of spreads it off into another narrative path. And I think we're moving off almost away from the detecting thing and more into something else of a storytelling device, I think possibly of June. Who knows? I am very excited at the prospect of that, actually, and more so even coming off the back of my play of Vienna Connection has really kind of got me going, ooh, what are they doing next? And I love the interaction between you and this computer. And, you know, if there's some people who are not fans of apps, then fine. It's not an app, essentially. It's on the desktop. You've got to do it, essentially. But it works. It's the one that does functionally what it does. With Detective, it worked in that very modern way and it had a lot more bells and whistles to it, and that was kind of cool. Vienna Connection, it's got a cut-down, limited version of it. And it's a nice aesthetic feel, adds a little bit of immersion to the proceedings and gives you something else to do. And it's not taking over the game, which is the issue I had with Chronicles of Crime, which is a similar system, but that just felt the tech was almost too much of doing lots of scanning and stuff, whereas it's there to complement in these games and aesthetically help, and it's cool. So yeah, sky's the limit. June I'm really excited for. I mean, more of this, great. But I mean, there's lots of opportunities here. Batman, I've dropped this before more than once to a Batman detective game. I mean, he's the ultimate detective. There's really something cool could be done with this. I mean, just I've got the things are churning just thinking here now. But yeah, lots of opportunity for some cool stuff down the road. That's brilliant. That's it. That's all I can say, really. I thought I've told you we don't do thumbs up, but fuck it, thumbs up. Vienna Connection, astoundingly great experience. If you want that Cold War thriller feel, the 3 Days of the Condor, Parallax View, that Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, all of that going on, and you love that his period of history, you are going to absolutely lap this up and enjoy it. If not, there's Detective Modern Crime or many of its other expansions bits that have come up. There's lots of options out there, people. I've been Mike B. This has been Who Dares Rolls. That was Vienna Connection for Portal Games, which is brilliant, might I say. Until next time, ta-ta.